So welcome to the Rise of the Super Being podcast. I'm your host, Vanderson Pires, and today my guest it's Miranda Clement. Miranda, she's comedian and a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Miranda came straight from Canada to train at Combat Room. Miranda, welcome to the
Thank you.
podcast. And also, this is the second season of the podcast. We have a new studio, so if you listen on Spotify, make sure check us out on YouTube because you're gonna see our beautiful new studio. Made Sam Bias helped me to create and organize everything for the lighting. So thank you so much, Sam. So Miranda, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So Miranda, so you came from Canada, straight to New
I
Zealand.
did. Yep.
No friends?
Not in New Zealand. I mean, I have friends. No, I didn't know anyone before I moved to New Zealand.
Really? So why did you, that's a question I get quite a lot as well. So
Yeah,
why New
yeah.
Zealand? Why did you come to New Zealand?
I actually came because I wanted to apply for grad school, and so I got a work visa because it's far from Canada. So I thought, well, if I get a work visa and I live there for a year, and see if I like it to make sure that I can handle being there for a few years at least. So I got here and I applied for grad school. Ended up applying for a PhD rather than a master's, and I didn't get in. But by that point, I'd gotten a really good job that I liked and really liked living here. So I just thought that I would stay. That's just decided to stay anyway.
So you're from Victoria, right?
Yeah, Victoria, BC was where I lived for a long time.
Yeah. So someone said it's kind of similar to remind a little bit Wellington, huh?
Yeah, I think it's a lot like Wellington. It's a city, but it feels really small. Like you'll still run into people in the street that you know, and like really nice old architecture. And it's only you can drive 20 minutes outside of town and be in beautiful nature, right on the ocean. It's very similar, and a big arts community as well. Like that's another thing I think they both have in common.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I remember a few years ago, my friend died from Raglan. So he sent me a message, Dai, it's an old student, and he said, I have this woman has been training here, and she's a blue belt, so she's moving to Wellington.
Yeah.
And you came.
Yeah.
Came for a visit.
One of the things that I found, because I had contacted a couple other gyms, and if I didn't really hear back from them, I was kind of, okay, well, maybe I just won't go there sort of thing. It's just, you don't, I feel really uncomfortable showing up to a place I've never really been, especially, jiu-jitsu is a little bit always tough to show up to when you're new and you don't know what the place is like. So when he gave me the recommendation, I was like, okay, that's definitely a place I'm going to go. And then, I got here and everyone was just so nice and welcoming. And, I can't imagine of going anywhere else after that. I actually, when I started, because I knew I was going to stay in Wellington for a while, I actually ended up trying to find a place to live close to the school because I wanted to make sure that I came regularly. So I still live about 5 minutes away. 2 years later, I still live about 5 minutes away. Yeah.
That's awesome. So Miranda, let's talk a little bit about your journey in Jiu-Jitsu. So why did you start doing BJJ? How was this? How was your first class?
So I was on the wrestling team in high school, which was something I really enjoyed. But once you sort of get out of that high school sort of team sports, there's not really outside of that. There's not really a whole lot you can do, especially in the city I was living in. So I tried to take up other sports, and I ended up playing rugby for a season, and then I took a lot of time off just because of work and school. And then when I think I was, 29, decided I'm going to play rugby again. Remembered I am a terrible rugby player. I was never good at it. Was terrible at it, and I really didn't like it after that other season I played. So then I'd finished that, and my best friend wanted to try jiu-jitsu. She trained in Taekwondo, and she's really big into watching UFC. So she's like, "This is the thing I want to do. Can you come with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I have nothing going on. Yeah, why not?" So the school that I went to was Fierce in Victoria, BC, and they had a promotion on where you could do a month for a flat fee. So I was like, okay, well, we'll go and I'll do a month and see if I like it. And I think by like the third class, I was like, oh no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is great. It combined everything I loved about sports, like different sports. Yeah, and then from there on out, I was pretty much hooked after that.
That's also like what? Give an example.
I like things that are high intensity, and as much as I like team sports and watching team sports. For me personally, I'm more of I like to challenge myself a lot, and I find that doing like a combat sport or like martial arts in that sense is really always about improving what you're doing, which I find really drives me, and I really like that. Also, it's just cool. Like, it's pretty badass. I just really enjoy it. And it makes me feel like I think it's giving me a lot more confidence, just in, so many ways. I mean, you could like unpack that whole, like, how is jiu-jitsu good for you thing, and you could go on forever about that. But I think just in terms of like being a sport and activity, it does everything that I just really enjoy. High intensity. It doesn't just work one thing. It's not like a lot of running. It's not a lot of this or that. It's like a full body workout pretty much every time you do it. Yeah.
And how was the reaction of people? The reason I'm asking that because jiu-jitsu, it's a very male dominant sport. So how was the reaction of other people when you said, and of course being a contact sport as well, right?
Yeah.
Some people feel a little bit uncomfortable, and so how was that?
I think there's you get a lot of different reactions. There are people, everyone thinks it's like really cool, it's really great. There are some people that immediately go, I could never do that, which I try to say, no, everybody can. You just, you either do it at the pace you're comfortable, or, jiu-jitsu is not you have to be this type of person sport. I think it's for everybody, and everybody can get something out of it. I do get some interesting reactions from men. It's how do I put it? Some people think it's really great. Other people take it as a challenge, and they tend to come back with some pretty interesting comments that I try to just let roll off, and I try not to ignore. Like, I try to ignore it as best as I can. But a lot of people can take it as a challenge, which I find just ridiculous. But
come on, please give example, because now I'm curious too.
Well, I talk about this in my comedy quite a bit. That a lot of reactions, especially if you're talking to someone new or on dating apps where there's that separation of like being able to talk to someone in person, they immediately turn it sexual, like, which I cannot stand. Like, please don't do this. Or they take it as a challenge and they immediately say like, well, I could still beat you in a fight. And it's, which you probably could, but maybe that's not a good thing to say to someone. I find that reaction to be quite bothersome. And that's generally when the conversation shuts down. Or at least it kind of gives me an insight into, they're maybe not as respectful as they should be.
Yeah, come on, guys. Shame on you and guys. What the hell?
It does happen quite a bit. But I think, some people are doing it jokingly, and that's fine. But, when it crosses a line, that's definitely not okay.
What do you think? What's the reason?
I don't know. I don't know if it's, just maybe some people out there just don't like strong women. I think that's part of it for some people. I would say that's a minority. I think there's just a lack of understanding when it comes to women doing male-dominated sports sometimes. I think some people don't see that you can still be a woman in a male-dominated sport. Doesn't mean you're, one way or the other, or you're like this specific stereotype, or, people think I'm really masculine or something. That's not the case. I think you can be, pretty much whatever you want to be. And I think some people are just kind of threatened by people outside of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I think there is this, people just assume I'm very aggressive and very, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Maybe aggressive is the right word. Yeah. Which I don't really think that is the case. No. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
That's interesting. And Miranda, so when you attended the first class, so did you have any information, and was nervous? How did you feel?
I think I was kind of nervous. I actually did start going to a women's only class, which I think is a really good intro.
Yeah, so true.
Which, you know, I had wrestled on a co-ed team, so it wasn't really an issue for me. I think you know, whether it's a women's only class or not, I think the women's only classes are great and they give people that platform if they're not comfortable. I wasn't uncomfortable with rolling and sparring with men. I think it's just that unknown. You don't know what to expect, especially when it's something that looks really high intensity like that. You think, oh, I'm not fit enough, or I'm not, you know, I'm going to look stupid, or I'm going to be really nervous and uncomfortable. And I think those were the challenges for me. Not knowing and being uncomfortable, I think, is the big one. So even like I was saying before, going to a school that you don't really know, I still get nervous about that, but I'm much more comfortable with it because of doing jiu-jitsu. I think one of the big things is that you get used to being uncomfortable, and that you can survive that, and that you can work through that, which I think is a really good. So I think for anyone who's interested in doing it, those feelings are very, very normal. Even for people who've been doing it for a couple of years, I'd still get nervous when I go to other schools. I don't think that will ever 100% go away, but just know that that's a normal feeling, and that, you know, I try to be really open about those feelings now, whereas before I think I would be a little bit shyer, like in saying like, oh, I feel kind of weird about this. I'm very open about, I think after I got my blue belt, I realized that your perception on the mat is very different than other people's. So when I think I'm having a bad day, other people think I'm doing really well. So I just try to remind myself that if I'm really nervous, other people are probably feeling that as well. So I'm very open about the feelings I'm having on the mat that day. If I think I'm having a bad day, I'll just say it, because I want other people to feel like they can be open about those feelings. I don't, because I really struggled with that. So I really try to do that, so that if other people are nervous, they feel free to say that they're nervous, and that way you get that support.
Yeah. Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah.
I love that. So Miranda, of course, being a purple belt now, no, on the past we kind of had a little bit, you know, a guy, you know, do you remember that was going a little bit hard?
Yes,
and you know, I think, you know, my students know what I do, you know, so what I did to you, can you explain?
You role played with me?
Yeah.
That part? Yeah.
And I was asking you to give a feedback, you know, to the person, no?
So I had, and I would say it was when I'd first come here, I think a little while after. I don't think I'd been here very long. And I would roll with everyone. That was, I think, the other thing that I had to learn, is that, you know, I was rolling with everyone, and I was, you know, kind of getting little injuries, not anything too big. But there was one day where I did have a full-on ugly cry on the mat in the middle of training, which Brian will never let me live down. We had talked about it, and I was struggling with saying to people, you're going too hard, or, you know, you need to pull back the intensity or the strength. And I think that was a big thing for me. I think I really struggled with that, and you were very nice. And we would role play, and that actually did help a lot. As embarrassing and awkward as it was for me, because it's really hard, but practicing saying to someone, you know, and giving them feedback on the role and saying that was too rough, or this, you know, made me uncomfortable, or something like that. So yeah, we had to role play for me to get through that.
We kind of, you know, we reverse a little bit, and I said, okay, Miranda, give me a feedback. You know? But I think that's a good thing.
It did.
Right?
It actually helped. Yeah, because there were times where it would kind of be on the cusp with some things, where like somebody would just use a little bit too much intensity in certain parts. And I started to be able to say, like, you know, you're going a little too, you know, let's just slow it down a little bit, or, you know, just watch out for this, or things like that. So I think that's really helpful. And I think that's another thing that I try to, you know, let other people know that they can do as well.
I think especially, you know, it's super important to give this feedback, because that's my next question to you, Miranda. So for example, some people, especially now you're purple belt, so some guys just gonna look to the belt as a purple belt. You know, for the ones who have no idea, purple belt's a big deal in jiu-jitsu. You know, it's a big deal. You know, so some people, oh, purple belt, you know, and You know, they just can see that in front of them.
Yeah.
So are you able to make the difference between when someone it's you know it's kind of a inexperience with that, or someone it's the ego it's hurting,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you know, and they trying to go hard
Yeah.
just to prove the point.
Yeah, I think it takes a while to feel the difference. I've definitely started to pick up on it more, and part of that is also the belt. Is that if I'm rolling with a white belt, I'm a little bit more prepared, and I do change my style of rolling to a little bit more defensive and a little bit more control. Because I know they're going to probably use too much strength, or they don't have the technique to really. Because if you don't have the technique, what you tend to just rely on strength, and that's natural. That happens to everyone. And then when it starts to veer into the ego a little bit more, you can sort of sense when, if I start to do a little bit better or I land something, the strength immediately sort of comes out, and you can tell it's reactionary. So sometimes it's not intentional, but you can definitely feel a difference after you've been doing it a while. And like I mentioned before, I think that's when I started being more selective in my roles, especially if I was concerned for my safety, which I think is a big thing. Especially for people who are smaller. If you're with a lot of opponents that are bigger than you and really strong, and you don't feel safe in a role, 100% just say no. And I think that was a big takeaway from that whole situation, giving the feedback. It got to a point where if I didn't even feel comfortable doing the feedback, I had the sort of authority to say no. And that's so there's some people that I don't roll with, and it's not because I think that they'll hurt me in any way. There's just some people that have a different style of rolling, and it just I don't feel safe, even though I don't think they wouldn't hurt me. It's just, a comfort thing. So unless I'm feeling 100%, I generally will, pick and choose who I roll with. Yeah.
But it's important. So do you feel comfortable of pick and choose who
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
train with?
Yeah. Cause I think, part of the conversation part of that conversation where you told me to give you feedback, but just practicing giving feedback with other people as well, is just I think you had actually told me to be more selective with who I roll. And I think I needed, maybe to you to tell me that. Cause I think at the time I didn't feel like I could, cause you do want to be, I think it kind of, at the time I thought maybe it meant that I wasn't as a team player, I guess, if that makes sense. But I think after that conversation, you said, no, you should, if you don't feel comfortable, don't do it. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm allowed to do that. All right.
Yeah. And especially now being a purple belt, even more, before, but doesn't matter belt, but now you have even more authority to say that.
Yeah, it's a little scary actually. Yeah. I think I'm not used to being a purple belt yet, so it's kind of. But because I remember looking at purple belts being like, they know everything.
Yeah.
And now I'm a purple belt going, I don't know anything. I don't know. All those people didn't know anything before? What? Yeah. It's subjective. Everyone knows a lot about a lot of different things. It's subjective. And I try to remember that too.
Yeah. So Miranda, now, of course, that's a big question. Because another thing as well, we were talking this week about this quote. I'm trying to remember the name of this quote, and I can't remember his name. He's a coach who came out and said he doesn't roll with a woman at the gym. What's that?
Oh, yeah, I can't remember.
I can't remember. It's a guy. He was GSP coach. I forgot his name.
No,
Fahar something like that.
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I can't remember his last name.
Yeah, so... And we even did a video just to see. And my question to you, how to roll with a woman?
Like normal. I think, I don't think it's a question of it being a woman or not. I think it's a question of size and strength. So I think gender in that sense should be kind of taken out of the equation, because somebody like me against even another woman that's maybe 100 pounds, just because we're both women doesn't mean I can go 100%. That's not how that should be, because that's not a good role for either of us. Neither of us are going to learn anything. So I think it's matching your ability and strength, because obviously if me and you roll, you've got a lot of different techniques. You would win every single time if you did everything that you could, but at the end of the day, that doesn't help me learn, and that doesn't help you coach or maybe things that you want to work on. So I think it's, gender I think should be put aside, and it should be how to roll with someone that's at your, technique or skill level, and what both of you are going to get best out of it. I think that's what I try to do. So, I don't think it should be about, women or not.
Yeah. And I think that what this coach did was such a disservice for the sport, because he's bring something doesn't exist. It's the sexual connotation on the mat. And this doesn't exist. What do you think about that, Miranda?
I definitely agree that it makes it seem for other people that that's an okay thing to do. And I think it alienates a lot of people who are very passionate about the sport and can bring a lot to it. Because I think one of the good things about rolling with people who are a different size than you, especially if they're smaller or, they've even got a different game, is that you'll learn a lot more. So if, a guy will only roll with men the same size and skill level, he's not really learning anything. And he's probably, this is a guess, maybe it's just a theory. But I think you end up relying on strength a lot, because at the end of the day, you're not focusing on doing the technique. And I think the biggest thing about jiu-jitsu is that if you have good technique, size shouldn't matter. And I think that kind of gets lost in those conversations. And I think it really does a disservice to that whole idea. If jiu-jitsu is supposed to be about, being able to use technique in place of strength, saying you're only going to roll with, just men or men that you train with that are maybe even similar size to you, I think, you're losing the point of how those techniques work. So the fact that somebody that's like a high level coach would say that, I find that's just awful.
Yeah, the biggest disservice for the sport. But and I agree with you 100%. Even in our video, if you someone watch, our video, we just did rolling as example. First, we're both having fun. We are both, doing jiu-jitsu. Exchange lots of different positions, lots of different techniques. And what's wrong with that?
Yeah, I don't get it. You're preaching to the choir. I don't get it. Yeah, and I think it's I don't. I actually get flabbergasted because I don't know what to say. I find that it's so. Why wouldn't you want to learn? Like, I think jiu-jitsu is about constantly learning, and I feel like he just basically cut that off. There's so much that you could learn from rolling with anybody.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Miranda, let's talk a little bit now about comedy. So Miranda, first, how did you get? How did you start comedy?
I'd wanted to do it since I was little. Like it feels very weird to say, especially because I started doing it so much later. But I think, like, when I was a kid, you're in elementary school and you do that project, like, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I legitimately did it on being a comedian. I remember asking my mom, like, how does a person become a comedian? And she was like, I don't know. So I think I wrote, like, you go to, like, acting school and things like this. But so I'd wanted to do it ever since I was little. And, my family watched a lot of comedy. And growing up, it was something that I always really enjoyed watching. And then I think I just got, nervous and, like, too nervous to do it. And then I think before I left Canada, I actually lived really close to a comedy bar. So I would go a lot. And I think I was sort of gearing up to, go. But I knew people who sort of did it in Victoria. And I think I just got too nervous. So I was like, okay, well, when I go to New Zealand, I'm going to try it. Nobody knows who I am. Yeah. I can make a complete fool of myself and it doesn't matter. And when I got to Wellington, there's a school that you can do. It's called the New Zealand Comedy School. Highly recommend it. And it's, you basically just go and you learn how to structure jokes and, you practice holding a microphone and you practice saying things in front of people, which the stage fright was really bad for me. I think the first couple times I went up, my hands were vibrating. I just couldn't, So it's something I always wanted to do. And I think, coming to New Zealand really, gave me the opportunity to do that because I didn't know anyone. But I think, I think also doing jiu-jitsu has actually helped get me there, which they're very different. But yeah, I don't think I could have done it without coming to New Zealand and training, because I think training keeps me sane at this point.
That's super awesome.
Yeah.
So Miranda, so how many people come to you and say, "Hey, do something funny or tell me a
All
joke,"
the
or all
time. All the time.
and how do you feel about it?
I mean, I get why they're asking. It happens at work a lot. People will say, "Oh, like, well, tell me, like, what is your comedy about?" And it is not work appropriate. So I generally say, like, I can't, I don't, I don't want to. It's not okay. Yeah, I find that really awkward, especially because, the comedy is not just standing in front of people and telling jokes. It's, I think, a lot more than that. It's a lot of setting up jokes and getting a mood sort of, and somebody just walking up to me and tell me a joke. Like, I'll tell you a joke that I got out of like a Christmas cracker. It's not going to be funny, but I'll do it. It's not very helpful, but yeah, I find that's a really awkward sort of thing. You put it on the spot, and I'm just like, yeah, but I'm not ready, and I haven't thought about it, and I don't have a set list, and so I do take a little bit of extra prep time to get ready.
Yeah. So Miranda, what's not funny?
What is not funny?
What's not funny?
What, when people say things to me?
Yeah. But I mean, now in comedy, because
I see.
Yeah, has lots of things are changing now.
Yeah.
Even I don't know. I don't understand anything. I have this admiration because I read somewhere, and I think it's so appropriate for comedy. So comedy is a very, very high way to express intelligence. You have to be.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, you have to be very smart, to be able to, to perform and to create a joke.
Yeah.
Even smart to understand the joke.
Yeah.
But things are changing. I don't know if you get someone who used to do comedy 10 years ago and something now, can be a little bit strange. So what's your thoughts?
I think sort of what you're referencing is that there are things that you used to be able to say that were maybe what we call punching down, and you should never be doing that. And that's one of the things that I think punching down is basically, if you think of where you sort of are. In terms of maybe privilege is a good word. So somebody like me, I can make jokes about other women. I can make jokes about white women. But if you were to make a joke about a white woman, it probably wouldn't, because you're in a higher place of privilege because you're male, unfortunately. Let's fix that as well. But so the idea of punching down is you never want to make jokes about people who would be considered less privileged or maybe disadvantaged than you are in life. So, I would never make jokes about people of color or LGBTQ people. Like, that's not okay. So if you look at old TV shows, I think is a really good example. Even, old sitcoms will make jokes about, make jokes referencing gay people, or fat phobia. It really comes up a lot, making jokes about fat people, which I really don't like either. Things like that are just not really okay anymore. So I think there are times where, things that I don't find funny are those things. And it still comes up, especially new comedians. It's a lot like, white belts, they'll use strength, not realizing that that's not really what you're supposed to be doing. It happens in comedy as well. People who are new to comedy will maybe make jokes that, aren't really okay. And sometimes people will say things, and other times you kind of got to let people figure it out for themselves. But, I think that's a really important thing which I think was, good that I went to the comedy school, because you learn that outright. But I think as you move through comedy, it's something that you learn by making mistakes. When people don't laugh, that's a really good sign that you're messing up. It's the great thing about comedy is you have immediate feedback about what you're constantly doing. So if people don't laugh, and especially Wellington will pick up on that stuff immediately. So I think Wellington is really great, has a really great comedy scene, because it really is, I think, more accepting than maybe other places. Like, I don't know, I haven't really done comedy anywhere else, but I can't compare it. So, but I've heard from other people that Wellington is a really great place for that. Yeah, I think punching down is, you see people do it and you're just like, oh no.
Yeah.
So that stuff's not funny.
Yeah, I love that. Do you know a joke you made? And I remember until this day, I think it
What?
was during the lockdown. So you made a post of men under 35 should not have a podcast.
Oh yeah, that actually wasn't my joke. That was something I reposted from another comedian, but it's very true.
And I
then
felt so bad. I said, okay, at least I'm 40. I'm over
Yeah,
40
you made
now.
it.
Okay.
You made it. Yeah, you're allowed.
Miranda, that was great.
Yeah.
So Miranda, so what's the goal of a comedy?
The goal of comedy in general,
Yeah.
or for me?
Both in general
Both.
and for you.
So I think comedy, to me, comedy is not me personally, but like what I think comedy for in general is to, I would say, to push the boundaries on important issues in a certain sense, because you'll notice that there's a lot of political comedy and things like that that'll come out, but really, even if it's personal to you, it's sort of a way of expressing things that you maybe want to see change, either within yourself or like, in your environment or like even the world in general. So I think one of the main things that comedy, I think, should be doing is kind of pushing the envelope and sending a message, whatever you want that message to be. So like mine in particular, I do talk about being a woman in comedy, or a woman in jiu-jitsu, and kind of the things that happen to me and things that I don't find okay, but I make jokes about them so that other people will think about them and think, well, they might not realize that, they're thinking about it, but if you portray it in a way that makes them laugh, I think people are more receptive to the message you're trying to send. So I guess that answers both of those. For me personally, I think that there are things that I don't like, and there are things that I talk about in comedy that have been really painful experiences. And I think a lot of people do that as well. They take things that are things that they don't like about themselves, or hard, events that they've been through in their life, and they can make jokes about them. And that's how I think a lot of people who are funny cope. But it also helps you kind of work through it, and other people might, work through those things as well, because you give them sort of a platform to say like, oh, other people have been through that as well. So I think things are relatable, or things that are relatable do make the best comedy, because everybody understands them. And I think that's how you get a group, like a whole room of strangers that don't know each other, all laughing about the same thing. It's because they can all understand sort of where you're coming from. So I think, on a bigger scale, you send a message about things that you think that, you want to see change. But even if it's just personal to you, other people will, find what they kind of, they have like an affinity with, and they may, see themselves in that. Yeah.
That's awesome. So can you tell what
Tell me a joke.
No, tell me what so on your act, what do you want to change in jiu-jitsu? So tell me,
I think it's
tell me
more
one
you can-
situation, because now I'm curious. And remember, I tried to go to
know.
your
Missed it.
I miss it. Oh,
Yeah.
that was such a frustrating that day.
Yeah,
We
literally
went-
walked off stage and you showed up.
You just came and said, because we finished the class, and I ran to
yep.
some friend.
Yeah. So the comedy, like a lot of my comedy is about dating and being a woman in jiu-jitsu, and how that affects my dating life, because it definitely does. Because like I said, men will immediately, like, well, I could still beat you in a fight. It's like, well, I don't really want to fight you. That's not really what I had planned for a relationship. So I think a lot of it is also just men's reactions. And I think one of the reasons I talk about it on stage is because I kind of want to, I guess, I don't want to say a reminder, but just, that saying those things isn't okay, but also there shouldn't be, I shouldn't have that competitiveness with someone else. Like, it's not, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. Like,
just say it.
I guess
Say it.
I think men take it as a challenge, and I'd rather find someone that thinks it's cool and they're interested in it. And I think I use it as a bit of a barometer in terms of my dating life, is if somebody immediately takes a kind of, offended stance and, doesn't like it, or makes a comment that comes off as, I still have the higher ground here. Like, no, I'm still, like, well, you're maybe not for me. But in my comedy, I think that's one of the reasons I talk about it, is because it's something that does bother me a lot. and just in terms of just being a woman in jiu-jitsu in general, there are times where, I think we talked about this the other day, I do have a joke about how, you know, rolling with a guy, sometimes their girlfriends don't like it, which is definitely something that that hasn't come up to me personally. I know it has for a lot of other women. And I think it is that, you know, some guys just won't roll with women because of there's this weird sexual connotation for them. And I don't think that's okay. But I think that's another reasons I've brought it up in my comedy, is to sort of say, you know, women are allowed to be in these spaces, and, you know, you're just going to have to deal with it. You're the one that has that issue, so that's on you. So it's things like that. They're serious things, but, you know, if I can make a joke about them and say them on stage, hopefully other people will sort of think like, yeah, that's a good point, and take that on board. Because I think comedy is a really great way to do that. To, you know, you could say, you know, you should be doing this, and, you know, we're allowed to be here, and you should treat us with respect, and people will get immediately defensive. And comedy is a good way to get them to see something from your point of view. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
of course. Yeah, because even I think a few weeks ago, you know, someone called me and said, you know, I'd like to try a class, blah blah, and we had this conversation as well, you know, and the person said, you know, but my religion doesn't allow me to roll with a woman, you know, to touch a woman. I said, my friend, also jiu-jitsu is not for you, damn. You know, here it's a place we accept everybody. You should do the same.
Yeah.
You know, the mats doesn't matter. We don't care if the person is tall, if the person is rich, if the person is poor. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
On the mats, there are no such a thing. But here definitely we know we have our standards, because we don't need to go that far. You know, in New Zealand, I already heard other schools when people, you know, women had to deal with this problem.
Yeah, and it's tough. You want you want to accept everybody, but you have to make sure everything is equal for everyone. And that's, you know, and I think that's the great thing about the school, is that I've never really once felt like, I think I actually made a post about it, like in the private group chat, that I think I'd had some situations outside of jiu-jitsu that I felt like I was being treated differently because I was a woman, and there was a situation that really upset me, and I put something in the Facebook group messenger for like our entire school saying like, I can't believe, like, it's weird. You don't think of it that way, but jiu-jitsu is like one of the only places that I've never felt singled out because I'm a woman. So like, you know, it'll happen maybe in people's work lives, like, you know, you don't get promoted because you're a woman, or the situation that I was dealing with, it just felt like I was being treated differently because of that. And it just, you know, you think that in a very male dominated sport I would deal with that here, and I never have. I've never felt like I've been treated differently because of that. And I think that's like a testament to, you know, your coaching and how you know, run the school. And I think that's a big testament to that.
Thank you. Yeah, but you know, that's the environment we want to be, you know, and it's a clear indication as well how healthy is the environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because if there are no women trained, okay, something's wrong here.
Yeah,
don't go, don't stay.
And I tell that to other people too, that if you, especially when I was looking at other schools as I was traveling around, if there's really no women there, it is a sign that, you know, it's maybe not the best environment. So I think that's something that people should take away, is that, because I find that there's that sort of idea where, you know, we don't have any women here, but we welcome them. It's not a problem. But the fact that they're not there is a symptom of the problem. And I think people forget that, especially in other, you know, sort of areas of life as well. Like if you have a job where you're only hiring men, you can say, you know, we don't have a problem with hiring women. Well, if that was the case, you would have them. So I think you're absolutely right. The absence of women being in that space means that there's a symptom of the problem. You know, it doesn't mean that women aren't allowed to show up there. It means they're not comfortable showing up. So I think it's important to really foster that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
We're just agreeing about everything. So.
Because we share, the same interests. So Miranda, and even lots of things, you know. I think even so. What do you address this problem? Because do you think it's a lack of education? It's you know, culture, it's a funny thing. No, culture, you know, it's that little poison. You know, we all drink and, you know, we get drunk out of that and we blame the thing, right?
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think should be the change? What do you think we should, you know, work a little bit more? You know,
In terms of like jujitsu or just in general?
in general.
In general, I would say ask other women to start. I think sometimes what happens is you end up having people that'll have the conversation saying, well, there's no, you know, women aren't showing up here for this, you know, thing or like event or whatever. Like, you know, they sit there and go, well, you know, we're doing, like, we've never said that women are allowed to be here. But I think it does take outside viewpoints. And I think that can be hard for some people to accept. To say, well, the fact that women aren't showing up is a symptom of the problem. So being able to ask other women why they're not sticking around and being able to take the feedback and take it in, I think is the biggest thing. So you have to be able to take the feedback and work on it, which I think that's hard for anybody. No one wants to hear anything negative about things that they're doing. But, you know, that's kind of what you have to do. So, you know, it does happen in comedy where there are certain things where, you know, women don't feel comfortable showing up to this show or, you know, just they're maybe not sticking around as much. And I think one of the things that I try to do, just even in comedy, is if new women are showing up, to really make them feel welcome and try to talk to them. And, you know, if they're nervous and stuff, you know, give them advice and things like that. Because even when I started, there were women around, but sort of people who stick around aren't, it's maybe a little bit harder. And I think comedy is just hard, same as jiu-jitsu. I think having the support there is really important, but, you know, for people who are like coaches or people who are running shows and things like that, I think it's important to ask the women for feedback. So if they feel that something is wrong, to know that they can come forward with that. And I think that's a big thing, because that's how you keep, you know, that's how they come back, or stay, I should say. So, you know, if you have a jiu-jitsu gym and you can't retain women, you know, if you ask them and they give you that feedback and you brush it off, you know, the problem doesn't get fixed. So I think taking the feedback is important from the people who, you know, you want to have stay. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting because you draw lots of parallels between comedy and jiu-jitsu.
I think they're really similar. I find that it takes a lot of the same skills. Like, one is a very physical, but, you know, jiu-jitsu is very physical. It also has a very big mental aspect to it. And I think a lot of those apply to comedy. So I do find that I'm not sure if I would have been able to stay in comedy without that jiu-jitsu as a background. Because in jiu-jitsu, you're basically just going to get used to failing. Like, that's so much of jiu-jitsu is just failure, just
well,
embarrassing.
All of us.
Absolutely, everybody. That's just, and it's a thing that you have to get used to. Like, if you get frustrated and you quit, jiu-jitsu is not for you. That's, I think, a really important thing to keep in mind, is that, and everybody feels that way. It's not, you know, a singular, not, you know, there's not people walking up to the mats being like, I'm great at everything. It's just, it's all about failure. And comedy is just much more public failure, is what it is. It's, you know, standing on a stage and standing there for 6 minutes straight and nobody laughing, and you have to just deal with it. You can't run away, which has definitely happened, and it's happened to everyone. It's just, you know, whether you can persevere and get back up and do it again. And I think jiu-jitsu prepared me for that quite well. Comedy is just a much more public failure. It's embarrassingly so, but it's true. You just get used to that uncomfortable feeling, and knowing that you can get through it, and that if you keep at it, it gets better. Like, the same thing they always say is, you know, if you just keep showing up at jiu-jitsu, just keep showing up, and that's it. And I find it's the same thing for comedy. You're not going to get worse by continually going up. So I think there is that big parallel, and I think that I don't think I could have done it without the other.
That's awesome, Miranda. That's super cool. So, Miranda, do you see resilience as a muscle as well, right? Because based on what you said, you know, the resilience to be able to do both things keep showing up in jiu-jitsu and keep doing comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's true. You'll go do a show, you'll bomb, you'll stand there in silence for 6 minutes, which is like emotionally, it's draining. It's very embarrassing. You're in a room full of people that don't find you funny. They don't like you. Like there's that immediate, we're not gonna. No, I'm not laughing at this. This isn't funny. And you do have to let it go. So I think as I've done it, the longer I've done it, it's easier to let it go. So I do think, that resilience muscle, you just kind of have to, you have your moment, you get off stage, and you just think, why do I do this? You have your 10, 15 minutes of beating yourself up going, that was awful and I feel terrible. Why do I do this? Why am I continually putting myself through this embarrassment? And then you just, okay, that's done. Let it go. And you get up and do it a couple days later. It's insane is what it is. Now that I've said it out loud, it's the definition of insanity, really, to get up and constantly do the same thing over and over again with terrible results. But it's true. You get used to it and you get used to letting it go. I think in terms of jiu-jitsu, there was something that a black belt said at my old school. And I think it was, I used to have good days and bad days at jiu-jitsu, and now I have days, I think he says, now I have days where I work on offense and some at defense. And I think that's a really good way to put it.
True, I love that.
Yeah, there's going to be some days you're good, some days you're bad. Or you could look at it, some days I work on this and some days I work on this.
That's beautiful. Of course, there's some days we work on the defense, some days we work on the attacks.
Yep.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love that.
Yeah, that really helped me a lot. 'Cause it's like, oh yeah, it's not that I'm terrible. I'm just working on defense today.
That's super cool, Miranda. So Miranda, now let's go for the embrace the chaos when I make some philosophical deep questions.
Yes.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Prepare myself for this, yeah.
That's awesome. So Miranda, do you cry?
I do.
When was the last time you cried?
Oh, man. I would say, I don't know if it's something specific. I tend to just need that emotional release, I think, every once in a while when I'm either under a lot of stress or something is bothering me and it's just not going away. I don't remember what the last one specifically was about. It was probably about just like some personal, you just hit that low point, you need that release. So yeah, I definitely do.
A bad Tinder date?
Yeah, it's probably a bad Tinder date. No. No, it was probably, I don't even know. I think work's really been stressing me out. It was probably just a combination of work and life stress. And just, those feelings of I'm terrible at everything and like just that overwhelm. I think I just need to let it out sometimes. Yeah.
So Miranda, which question should I ask you and I didn't?
That's a good question. And I've seen you ask other people this, and I wanted to prepare for it too. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe, what I want to do with comedy. I think that's something that I'm trying to figure out right now.
Please. What?
I think the next things that I want to do with comedy, because it is something that I want to move forward with. And I think I don't think I've been doing this consciously, but I think I've been actively holding myself back for fear of being sort of more out there. Does that make sense? Like, I think when I first started, I did struggle with stage fright and stuff. And I think I've gotten to a point where I feel comfortable and I know I have to push through that. And I've realized that my comfort level is, putting clips online and, really being more visible. I think that's something that I need to work on. So I think I've been slowly trying to make improvements and do that and get like headshots taken and kind of gear up for some bigger things. But I think that's where I want to go. I'm going to be traveling up to Auckland to do some shows, and hopefully,
awesome. That's amazing.
And hopefully start to do more of that, and start doing some more stuff online, and really saying yes to things that I immediately go like, no, I don't want to do that, and just saying yes because I know I'm just saying it out of fear.
That's awesome. So Miranda, what's life is about?
And again, I wanted to have a good answer for this because I knew you were going to ask. I think, I've heard some other people's, responses, and I felt like, very wide and philosophical, and they sounded much smarter than me. I think for me, it's, striving to be the best that you can, because that helps other people as well. And I think it's kind of a weird way to say it. There's probably a better way to say it, but, being present and being the best version of yourself, I think goes a long way to also helping other people. I, like you, for example, you're very present. I've really admire the way that people show up here and you immediately make them feel welcome and are very genuine in every interaction that I see you in. And I think that's amazing. I strive to be that way. I know I'm definitely not, because I get very I can be very internal sometimes when I need to process things. But that's something that I really strive for. And I think that a good life is being present and being genuine, because it's good for you, but it's also good for other people. That's what I think.
That's so awesome. So Miranda, if you could go back in time and give advice to your 15 years old Miranda, what do you say to yourself?
Yeah, and immediately my first thought was, break up with that guy that you're with, because you don't need him. Get out while you can. I think the biggest thing for me would be to live, now that I've very publicly said that, I think to live for yourself and make choices for yourself. Because I think for a long time, I did hide behind other people and what other people wanted for me, and really struggled to have my own voice. And I think the biggest thing that I absolutely wish that I could have done, and I try to do for other people now, is, you're allowed to, you shouldn't put other people before yourself if it's the detriment to yourself. Don't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, is I think the phrase that I tend to use more often than not, because I think I did that for a long time. And I feel like in the last even 4 or 5 years, I've done things that I never would have done. Even living in New Zealand and doing comedy or even jiu-jitsu, I don't know if 15 years ago I ever would have done that, because I was just so afraid to be myself and be and be, I don't know, the person that you really should be, the person that you sort of are inside and really should be present. I think that's the biggest thing, is that I would go back and start living life for myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
it sounds really selfish, actually, now that I say that about loud. But I think I was scared to. Yeah. And I think that's something that I try to do for myself now, but also other people. So, I know that sometimes I can come off as I don't care about this or whatever, but it's generally because for a long time, I really struggled with saying the things that I needed and wanted out of life. And I feel like I've just maybe gone a little bit to the other extreme a little bit sometimes. But I want people to do the things that really mean a lot to them and that they should strive for. So when people tell me they want to do jiu-jitsu or comedy, I'm like, yes, do it. If you have that inkling, just, what does it hurt to go and try it? Don't be, nervous or not do it out of fear. You should just try the thing, and you don't know what'll happen. Yeah.
That's so awesome. I love that. Miranda, 3 most influential books.
Yeah. I'm not a big reader, to be honest.
Yeah?
Sarah, but I would say The Artist's Way is one. It's like a creativity sort of book that you can work through, which I find really helpful. There's another book. What is it called? It's sitting on my desk too. And it's one that I've read more than once. One of Brene Brown's books.
Okay. She's great.
Yeah.
She's awesome.
I think The Gift of Imperfections would be on there. I think was one that really resonated with me. And the other book is by an author, Jen Sincero, and I can see the cover and I can't remember. It's like a self-help book, but it goes over kind of a lot of different areas, like meditation and sort of the thing I was saying before, you should be your genuine self and things like that. So it's by Jen Sincero, and I just can't remember the title of it. Saved my life. It's sitting on my desk too, which is terrible because I can see the cover. I just can't remember the name of the title.
So Miranda, the last one. What's funny?
What's funny? Anything that takes me by surprise. I think the things that I find the funniest are like kind of observational humor, kind of like Jerry Seinfeld, like pointing out random things about life that just don't make sense. Those are the things that I find really funny. But anything that takes me by surprise, I just find hilariously funny. You know, I know some people like deadpan, very like serious comedy or very heavy stuff, but the things that I find the funniest are generally observational things about people that just don't make sense. This is something that I've been trying to turn into a joke, and it's definitely not funny yet, but somebody pointed out to me the other day that I was eating a banana at 4:00 in the afternoon, and that was weird somehow. And I was like, is there a perfect time to eat a banana? Like, is there a time frame I'm supposed to be doing this? Just things like that, like just random things you wouldn't think about. Like, no, that's weird. Same thing somebody mentioned the other day, like I'll have like broccoli and things for breakfast. They're like, broccoli's not a breakfast food. I'm like, who decides that?
Yeah.
Who decides that this is a breakfast food or not? So just things. So I find those things very amusing.
That's awesome. So Miranda, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much
for
share your story.
Thank you.
You're super brave, you're super smart, and you're super strong. Yeah, and we are super lucky to have you part of the team.
Thank you very much.
So thank you, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Let's change the world together, right?
Perfect. Yes. Campaign promise.
Yeah. Thank you, Miranda.
Thank you.